Good evening. I want to welcome you all to another interview concerning the mega gun bill, House Bill 2502. And tonight we finally got, we've been trying to get on board technologically. We finally got Senator Forrest Knox with us tonight. And he was the chief author, of course, of Senate Bill 65 and 66 and has worked on this issue that is really kind of the foundation point of 2502 for years. And we just are so glad to have you here, Senator. Tell us a little bit about how 65 and 66 and what you've been doing got now to where it's at in 2502, if you could, please.
All right. Well, it's good to be here. And so I'm hoping I'm in the Senate chamber here. I hope it doesn't echo too much. I thought it might be a unique place to be since I'm at the Capitol today. But we worked on public building security, which is kind of my part in this. And the idea is that if government isn't willing to provide for our security, then they shouldn't be able to keep us from providing for our own security. So that's.
Well, we just lost Force again.
Are you
there? Still there?
I lost you. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, there you are.
So it went blank for a time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what we've passed in recent years, now for the last 4 years. And I considered 65 and 66 kind of cleanup bills on this. And they arose because either public employees or public employers had made requests. One was, the easiest one was 66, was the original bill. And that was that we ought to be able to secure a part of a public building. And when I say public building, I mean publicly owned. Well, I'm talking state buildings, I'm talking county and city buildings where the public has access. And the original bill said you can, if you provide security, you can keep concealed carry from happening in that building. If you don't provide security, you can't. And that years ago, and there were some exemptions that you could, and those will end not this summer, but next summer. And so that's what we've been hearing about with campus, guns on campus and things. Those exemptions, which allow them to continue to post even though they don't provide security, they will end in the summer of 17. Well, courthouses oftentimes would like to just allow guns in their buildings, but they would like to, the judges usually request that we could secure a part of the building. Lots of times it's the second floor of rural courthouses where the courtrooms are. They'd like to provide security so that no guns can enter that part of the building. But the Attorney General made a ruling and said, I think rightly so, the language of the bill, the language of the statute only dealt with buildings. It didn't deal with parts of buildings. So Senate Bill 66 defined a public area, allows courthouses to do what some of them are already doing legally, and that is to post one room or one floor or a part of the building that can be secured. They can provide security there, and they can say, you can't take your concealed weapon in that part of the building because we're providing security for you. So that was kind of an easy part. The counties and the cities weren't opposed. Everybody was supportive of that. That was kind of unusual, actually.
Yeah.
The part was public employers. And this came when public employees came to me and said, and first it was Department of Revenue employees, very concealed in the docking state office building, but we can't carry when we're on the job outside the building, in our cars, out to visit businesses and things. And so in my mind, it was the same logic. If your employer can't provide for your protection, then they shouldn't be able to require you to be defenseless. And so, and that was Senate Bill 65. And all this now is a part of 2502 that was done in conference committee. And So this public employer part says that an employer cannot require their employee to be defenseless. So state employees, county employees, city employees, when they're on the job, can carry a concealed weapon, their own defense, because the employer's quite simply not able to do that. So there is no qualification on that, as in the buildings. There are no exemptions. The governor signs this and becomes law on July 1st, then public employees will be able to provide for their own defense, as long as they can possess a weapon in a legal manner. Let's just say that.
Right.
So if they're under 21, they won't be able to carry concealed. Nobody legally carries concealed under 21. Now, open carry is a different animal all the way around. And that's why I push so hard that every citizen should be able to carry concealed. And that's why we passed what we passed last year, Senate Bill 45.
Correct.
Because when you're carrying openly, and I believe firmly in our constitutional right to open carry, but I just think it's wiser sealing instead of open. It's probably smarter in terms of defense, because then you're not a target. It also is no perceived threat to anybody. So anyway, that's kind of the background on the bill. We were able to put together several things, which mainly the House put in committee hearings. But this went through 2 years of process, several hearings. These Senate Bill 65 and 66 was combined in Senate committee this year as substitute for Senate Bill 65. That ran across the House or the Senate floor. I believe the vote was 32-7. So these gun bills, for what all the media says, they have tremendous support, quite simply because citizens believe in the Second Amendment. It's really been a pleasure to work on these issues because there's so much public support when it really comes down to it.
Yeah.
If you have specific questions or.
Well, the issue of and J.R. Clays, Representative J.R. Clays, and I discussed the public building portion just like you did. You did a fine job of explaining it. For instance, now when a person will go into that courthouse, is the protocol already set as far as where that posting will be? If they're going up the stairs or the elevator or to that place where they can't carry?
The posting needs to be per the Attorney General's regulations, and that's been in existence ever since licensed concealed carry. And so it has to be in plain sight. It has to be the regulation sign that he's defined, distance off the floor, certain distance from the doorway. Now, one thing that was added, there were a few things added in committee, in the House committee, and House members, I was working closely with them, and which is not required, but I think everybody knew that I'd worked on this for a long time, and they were cordial to consult me. There were several things that were done. One, a representative that had been a mayor was very aware of cities concerned. She wanted to make sure that you could temporarily post a room or a part of a building and provide security. As far as I understood, they ought to be able to do that without it being specifically spelled out, but that was adopted in the House committee. That was a part of the conference committee report on 2502. But the signage, the security would have to be according to statute.
Okay.
So you may have a door, a sign, on a pedestal or something sitting there. The Attorney General's guidelines that he's given me quite a few years ago. This was 10 years ago now. We passed concealed carry, licensed concealed carry.
Yeah.
And so that was a part of this bill. Another part that I think the House committee did a fine job on. Actually, it was a brand new member of the Fed and State Committee that was just brought in there, and he said in the definition of adequate security, it should specifically spell out that the personnel have to be armed. You know, if you're disarming people, if you're checking people, running them through a metal detector, and making sure no guns enter the secured area, we may want to make sure that the personnel that are manning that place are armed. So they added that into the definition of adequate security, which was a very he was very observant. He was thinking about this. I really appreciate legislators that understand and give thought to this. So that was something else that was amended into the House committee, that their work they did, and he checked with me on that. I said that is a great idea. And then another, and it was actually at my suggestion, the language that deals with courtrooms. Judges have authority,
Right.
over, and I think it says ancillary courtrooms. And that there was an amendment in the original bill that was run 4 years ago, that made it clear that they had that authority. And I was able to get some language in that they couldn't just do that arbitrarily. They had to provide security. So we changed the language in that part of the bill and made it the same language as the definition of adequate security and the language that's used in other parts of the bill, just to make it consistent. So that was a change done at my suggestion by the House committee, that I felt was very important. The other things that were kind of the new changes to the law in this bill, it was actually quite unclear. The deal about the 4-year exemptions, and the truth is, and I think I understand the law pretty well since I wrote most of this, somebody that had never asked for an exemption could come right now, and they don't actually ask for an exemption, they exempt themselves and they give notice to the Attorney General.
Right.
A public entity that hadn't exempted themselves pre-exempt themselves now and get 4 more years. And so that kind of left this open-ended. So we changed the language to a date certain, which would be July 1, 2017. That was another small change that was made in the law that should take effect this July 1st. So anyway, those are just small cleanup things.
Now, first of all, how will this affect our college campuses?
Well, most college campuses have exempted themselves. And okay, so let's think about this. And so they are exempt from the law July 1 of 2017. But boy, that might be a question for the Attorney General now, how the public employee aspects of this affected. Because we basically said a public employer cannot, adopt regulations that requires their employees to be defenseless.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to, or it might take an AG opinion to determine whether, while that exemption is in place, the employees are still required to be defenseless. Nobody's raised that question. I would guess that the exemption keeps them, allows that employer to continue to adopt regulations that keep the professors and staff from carrying.
Until July 1/17,
My
right?
son's at one of the institutions, and legally he can carry concealed on the grounds, certainly on the grounds, but in the buildings, though the buildings are posted and there's an exemption. Okay. So legally, he can carry. There is no criminal penalty. If they find out he's carrying concealed, they can only ask him to leave. The problem is right now, they could kick him out because it goes against the rules. And that's another question. So there'll probably be cleanup in the years to come. There always is. I believe once the exemptions end, so a lot of that will be clarified. A student that can legally carry a handgun will be able to carry concealed, that can legally conceal a handgun. Exemptions are done, then a lot of things will be clarified. And and the campuses will have to allow, unless they provide security in the buildings, they'll have to allow their staff, their teachers, their students who are legally able to carry. So that's a lot of what's unclear is how the exemptions work out with all these.
So some of that may, from my understanding, may be connected to that July 1 date for the public employees, for the faculty members, etc. That'll be connected to that date. And then after July 1, 17, and correct me if I'm wrong here, then they'll be able to carry themselves, even if personnel policy, if I remember reading the bill correctly, even if personnel policy, well, actually, personnel policy doesn't allow that for public employee. Is that correct?
There will not be able to be any personnel policies.
Right.
Dealing with this, they will have to allow.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's from July 1, 2016 to July 1, 2017 is really the area of question, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. And because that's when these exemptions continue to be in effect. And the exemptions, quite frankly, I wrote those exemptions. I brought those into the bill, actually, way back in the House when I was there. That's one of the very few political things I've done, because it alleviated a lot of the angst and the pressure. I think it would have easily passed without the exemptions. At that time, I was trying to make sure we could get it over to the Senate, and they'd have to take a vote, just because of the politics, to hold people accountable in how they were voting. And I'm a time to get things done here. I've got 4 years. Actually, when we heard this bill on the floor of the Senate this year, there were amendments to extend those exemptions. There were amendments that legislators brought to make them permanent. There were, and we defeated all those amendments.
Right.
Then on the other hand, an amendment was brought. They'd kind of opened the can of worms, was my view.
Yeah.
And I was pretty plain in what I had to say about it. And I said, there's no way I can't support an amendment to shorten the exemption by 1 year. But that bill failed. That amendment failed on the floor of the Senate. And the logic was we wanted to stick to our original word. And it's rare that I publish an explanation of vote in the journal, but I did, and basically pointed out the seriousness of this. If we were, God forbid, if we were to have a shooter come onto our campuses, and we had students or staff that were injured or killed, that were not able to provide for their own security because the school had exempted themselves, then we would look back and say we should have shortened that exemption period and ended it, rather than allowing it to stand. So we'll just pray that nothing happens that makes us regret that.
Yeah.
But kind of interesting. When I entered into this whole business, it was to get people thinking about security, to get people thinking about those signs and realizing those signs do not make you safer. They make you less safe. That's why I entered into this whole thing. And actually, we've really made good progress, far better than I thought we would make, and have come back very closely to the Second Amendment. But why have we done that? Well, we've done that because that's what Kansans believe. think about this, the stronger they support the Second Amendment. So it's been a pleasure, being able to accomplish as much as we have. Something to be proud of.
Now, something too is that there's the term public area, and then that would cover, for instance, at a college campus, say Bill Snyder Family Stadium or Memorial Stadium at KU or any of the other football stadiums around for Pittsburgh State or Washburn. Well, Washburn's actually owned by Topeka. I'm sorry, city of Topeka. But those football stadiums would be that would be considered a public area, and they have to have, for instance, a metal detector and staffed by an armed person at that entrance. Is that correct?
That yeah, if they're going to secure and post no concealed carry, they're going to have that. The question is, and maybe this is another question, so let me read the definition. Area means any portion of a state or municipal building that is open to and accessible by the public, or which is otherwise designated as a public area by the governing body or the chief administrative officer, if no governing body exists, of such building. I think it's very plain that you can't post an athletic field. That is not a building. We've made this where the statutes were a bit unclear when I began this process, 6 or 7 years ago, of public building security. General staff suggested that we clean up the statute and define only a building, not a premise, only a building. And so we made those changes and made the concealed carry and the signs apply to buildings only. Okay, so for instance, on a college campus right now, even though they've exempted themselves to have a concealed weapon on your person on campus, you're just, the signs deal with buildings, the security deals with buildings.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, you can't provide security for somebody out on the grounds. Just like the public employee business, okay? So I think the Attorney General sticks to a very strict interpretation. That's why we had to do the public area, because we said building, part of a building. Okay, so that's why we had to define a public area as a part of a building, and that's what that definition does. So can you post an athletic field and provide security? I believe you can't under the law.
Okay.
And actually, I believe you can't right now, even with an exemption, because the exemption only applies to buildings. So just like you can carry concealed on campus right now, that you can carry concealed in athletic fields right now. Now, that's a bit controversial to say that, but
sure.
A plain reading of the law says that. So.
And I appreciate that. And of course, folks might want to get in touch with their legal counsel if they have to.
Yeah.
On that matter. The other thing that did come into play late in the process with 2502 was the public employee and the school employees and how they were exempted under the Todd Amendment. Can you explain that, please?
Okay, so you cut out a little bit there, but you're talking the public employee part. This was added in the conference committee report. And so this language, all of this is done in public. These conference committees do not meet privately. It's all public. The press is there if they want to be. I mean, anybody's there that wants to be. So this did happen at the last minute. I wasn't very happy with it at all. But we have exempted school districts. We allow school districts to post. Okay, so let's be clear. If you have a concealed carry license and a school building is not posted, you are legal to carry in that building. It's posted under Kansas law. that says you can't carry in there, because federal law exempts if you're a licensed concealed carrier.
Correct.
So now anybody can carry in Kansas now that can legally possess a handgun. But this only applies if you're licensed, because that's how federal law deals with it. So this change, which says school districts are not included in the definition of public employer, okay, and that's for this. I mean, they certainly are public employers in the law's eyes in other areas. But in terms of this statute, they're not considered a public employer. So what that means is that school districts will be able to continue by policy to require their employees to be defenseless when they're on the job outside the building.
No, that's outside. That's outside the building, right? Like on a field trip, correct?
Yeah. That's a school bus driver that's concerned on a football field. And here again, the question, because of the mix between federal and state law, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert on these things, you're probably on shaky ground if you're anywhere near the school property carrying a concealed weapon and without a license.
Correct.
Okay. But before we made this change, it would have allowed teachers, school bus drivers, and the like who were outside the buildings who had a concealed carry license to have been able to carry. Now, let me make clear that because I've had inquiries of school board members, especially in my rural districts, they want to make sure that that they have licensed concealed carriers, teachers that are carrying. And I don't think there's too many doing this yet. But specifically in law, we allow that. The school is in charge, and they're still in charge here. They could allow a teacher to carry concealed, that it was licensed, that met their requirements to carry concealed in the building, on the bus, wherever they want to. School districts can do that. But this change that was brought in at the last minute doesn't say they have to do that. Allowed that choice.
So it's a kind of a, it was nonsensical, to be quite honest.
Well, yeah, I didn't like the way it was done. I didn't like anything about it. But when you get to the end, and I was pretty upset. I don't get upset about too many things. But in the end, you got to, up here, you've got to take what you can get.
Yeah.
And leadership on the House side was not happy to leave that out. My point was, you're accommodating people who are not, who have not signed the conference committee report. And I might say, you have chair and the ranking Democrat on the House side and on the Senate side. Those are the 6 members of the conference committee, and all 6 signatures have to sign the conference committee report. Unless you run an agree to disagree, it's a further step on, because the Democrats were not signing this conference committee report. So we accommodated people who were already not signing the report and who were not voting for the conference committee over backwards to accommodate them, and I did not like that. But House leadership made it clear this was going to happen, or it wasn't going to run. So that was unfortunate, but we accomplished a lot this year anyway, even with that.
So there, I did solicit questions, and we didn't receive any on this situation, but I'm quite sure that we will going forward. We may get some questions on Kansas Gun Laws and Legislations page, and of course you're on there personally, and you can feel free to answer some of them if you see it. But I answer them for the most part, along with our other team members from KSRA, and we were opposed to the Todd Amendment and made that very publicly clear, and that was the amendment about the school employees. In our eyes, it's essentially making those kids at their most vulnerable state on a field trip the softest target possible. If a
Yeah,
school
well,
employee could
right.
not, cannot be bearing arms at that point in time.
I
And
was
that's,
I was
go ahead.
prepared to argue that, and that's what I wanted. I said, well, let's bring this. Of course, we were right at the tail end of the session. It was an unfortunate way
Yeah.
that things were done, but um, and my argument was exactly what you said. I was invited several years ago to a meeting at the Fusion Center, and I think I had no idea what the Fusion Center was, and it's out here at the National Guard at the Armory Center headquarters for Kansas, and they're basically the people that are kind of the intelligence people, and it's actually uh, a very powerful intelligence center
Yes.
that's comparable with New York City's, and it's really the only one in the center of the United States, and they do an excellent job. And it was all new to me. I mean, I am no expert on security, but we were able to ask questions. The guy that heads it up was showing us and talking to us about it, and someone asked about what he perceived to be the, I guess, terrorist threat um, in Kansas, and it was interesting to me. He brought up um, um, what's it called, magnetic pulse.
Yeah, electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah, somebody, he said that is a credible threat, but it would take a government, a country, to put
Mm-hmm.
up they could put up an atomic bomb up into the atmosphere and set that off. And so that's not at the top of the list of the threat. It was interesting to me that this was not a wacko right-wing extremist mentioning this. This was somebody trained, very knowledgeable in this. But the most credible threat was a gunman or an attack on schools.
Yep.
And so, this is since we've passed these public building security bills, there's been a lot of people considering security in public buildings, which is a very good thing, and considering the security of our schools. And most schools are locked up pretty tight. So it would take an assault on the school probably to even enter the school. That would give you some warning. So it hardens it a little bit, I suppose. I would hope there were weapons and defense within the school, but the soft target remaining is the school buses.
Mm-hmm.
The field trips. Now, I lived in the 80s. I lived in Israel for 6 years. Israel learned that schools were a soft target, and so they armed teachers. That solved that problem. Terrorists are not particularly courageous people. They're looking for innocent, defenseless people to shoot, just like the crazies are that are shooting in situations in this country. But when we were in Israel, you saw weapons a lot, because when they sent soldiers home on leave, they issued them a weapon to carry home. So the buses were full of soldiers carrying weapons with the clips loaded and strapped to the side of the M16. When it was a lady soldier, and all girls serve in the Army 2 years, they'd send them something small like an Uzi. It was quite interesting. But people didn't have weapons in their homes at that time. People did not have concealed carry licenses at that time. They do now.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of private security. The only time you saw a gun in the hand of a civilian was when kids were taken on field trips. They always made sure. So I was out in the Judean wilderness, hiking down to a spring, and here come a group of kids, and there was always one or two, maybe parents, I don't know who they were, but people in civilian dress carrying an M16. So those are the softest targets, and hopefully, hopefully we won't ever see terrorism here in Kansas. That's I would say we should do more than hope on that. We need to be prepared, and this was a
Absolutely.
disappointment. So anyway, all right.
Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, who's going to be with us at our annual meeting next year, course, a very authoritative figure on the matter, points out in his, I believe it's in both in On Killing and On Combat, and I know it's in his presentations because I've watched them and stuff. But he points out that very fact that the largest single civilian casualty event, a terrorist event, as far as a mass shooting and that type of thing, was before 9/11, was a school, and it was two of them. And of course, there was one in Norway, and then there was another one in Russia. Right. And he goes into great detail and explains that, and talks about this very, very issue in a very passionate way. I mean, if anybody's ever heard Lieutenant Colonel Grossman speak, they know that he's very passionate. But it does bother us at the KSRA that we would let our kids. Now I know it does you too. We're both members of the KSRA. You have been for a long time, and that we leave our kids defenseless at their most vulnerable time out in the middle of public, and people don't think through that, and so
that's just it. They don't think through it.
Yeah.
And with each step we take here, and the media coverage lots of times not very good on this, but the more that's out there, the more people think, and the more we'll turn this around, and we'll be smart. We need to be smart.
Absolutely. Well, coming to a close here of our time together, and I so appreciate Forrest, our time together. We have become friends over the time, and I appreciate our friendship and the work that you've done for the Second Amendment, continue to do, and of course you were awarded the Legislator of the Year this year by the KSRA. And we appreciate you so much. And there's so many other guys too that work very, very hard on the House side and the Senate side. Kind of sorry to see Senator O'Donnell announced today. It was announced today that he's going to be stepping out of the Senate. So
he brought the amendment to cut the. I appreciated that. I was wondering to myself if he'd have the guts to do that, and he sure did.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of work. I appreciate KSRA. I appreciate you, Lyle. And I need to mention because KSRA hasn't always been so involved. It's very important. And so let me just mention Patricia Stoneking. When she came on board, boy, she got things moving. And but you guys are carrying on very well in her footsteps, and wish her the best. Of course, I know she's going through some struggles, but she did a great job, and you guys are carrying on. It takes a lot of work, and appreciate what you guys have been doing. That's sort of thing.
She's still involved. She's had input and still does, because she's the immediate past president and sits on our executive committee, and she's still involved this year. She was involved behind the scenes. But indeed, our new president, Kathleen Wade, does an absolutely fantastic job. Yeah. And I know you've got a chance to meet her. And then there's our whole board. We're excited about our board as we move forward too. But you guys are at the point of the spear right there at the State House, and in that chamber that you're sitting in, the People's Chamber. For the Senate, and I encourage folks, if they've never been to the Capitol building, make it a point to go down and sit in the gallery. It's free, and it's our house, if you will.
Yeah, that's right.
And we can go down and
pay attention. That's what I said ever since I got elected. So I need to watch close what's going on here. So, and this is just the Second Amendment is really it gets a little discouraging up here sometimes, but. What's been done in terms of bringing us back to the Constitution has really been an encouragement, and you guys have had part of that. So I appreciate that. So
now, if anybody wants to follow you or get a hold of you, as far as on Facebook or what, do you have a website, or how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, if they just Google me, they'll find lots of ways. But Forrest J. Knox on Facebook. I'm using Facebook a lot more. But email, and I do have a website too. So you can get on my email list. I have a lot of people on it. I try to write weekly columns and deal with issues. That slows down a little bit in between sessions, but I still get on there to say this election year, there's a big push to bring us back to the left. Let's just say it that way. So for people who believe in the Constitution, who believe in the principles that our nation was founded on, be paying attention, and you probably ought to consider what you can do, whether you can help your local legislator, check out your local legislator, make sure he's on board, with Second Amendment issues and Constitution issues. Don't just take for granted. It takes a lot of work. This is a year when there's a tremendous push, and there's be a lot of challenges against a lot of us. So we'll see if the people of Kansas will hang strong on Second Amendment and hang strong on the Constitution. That's a real question. I think they will.
Yeah.
I think nothing's changed with what the people of Kansas believe. I don't believe. I think they're solid and conservative in terms of they believe in government, but they believe in limited government. And they believe government shouldn't be able to take away their rights, especially the rights that are spelled out clearly in the Constitution.
Amen.
So my little plug.
Yeah.
All right.
I know you have Kansas. Is it Kansas for Knox or Kansans for Knox?
Kansans for Knox is so Facebook. I have Forrest J. Knox is my Facebook page, and then Kansans for Knox is I guess they call it a page. I don't know how that is, but anyway, you can go to either one of those, and I post things on both. So.
Okay. Well, good deal.
Appreciate that.
Good deal. Well, I'll wrap up here, and Forrest, again, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and
all right,
we will stay in touch with you, and of course, we're hoping during the session too next year to be able to stay in touch with you guys a little bit more.
I plan to be back. All right.
All right. All right. Good talking to you, and thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, KSRA followers, for watching tonight, and I just appreciate so much being able to get Senator Knox on here. And if you want to get a hold of him, there was any number of ways that you could do that. And if you don't know who your representative or senator is, you can go to kslegislature.org. That's kslegislature.org, and they'll be on the left-hand side. You'll be able to go down and find your legislator, or you can go on our website, ksraweb.org. That's ksraweb.org, and you can actually get a hold of us, or actually search that out on our website as well in the legislative section. So you can get a hold of your legislator, find out who they are, get involved, and go down to the State House and get to know them. And there's just so many opportunities for you as an individual to get involved in the Second Amendment issues and in the shooting sports, just like this year with the BB gun, air gun portion of HB 2502. That was just huge for the state of Kansas and for kids in the shooting sports. So please remember that, folks, that you can be involved. It isn't just up to a certain few, and the power goes to a certain few. But in fact, if you're a KSRA member, we have a voice. And if you're not a KSRA member, I encourage you to be one. Number one, you need to invest in that. Why? Because we fight for folks as in a lobbying way, and so many different other ways. We encourage and support the shooting sports. If you're not a KSRA member and you choose not to be, and that's completely your choice. But be involved. Please be involved in that, in the process, because otherwise you can sit and gripe all you want about our Second Amendment issues or shooting sports or whatever it is. But there's plenty of opportunities for you to be involved. So thank you so much for being with us and watching, and through all these interviews that we've had, and we plan on having more with folks about certain issues as time goes on, and having them during the session and actually being down there at the State House. I appreciate the work with Mariah Day, our PAC chairman, and he's going to be working with me on those things as we go through, and how we keep in touch with through social media, through YouTube, through all these various great technological means. So on this Tuesday night, I hope you have a great evening. And everybody, take care, get involved, become a part of the KSRA, and have a great evening and a great week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.